What's going on, guys? Check it out. So this review is coming out a little bit later than I wanted it to. Life is a little bit crazy right now, and so as a result, this is what we're working with. But I wanted to start this one talking a little bit about Michael Giacchino for a second, because he's quickly become a favorite composer. Well, not quickly; it's taken some time. I just think for myself, he's become a favorite of mine. If you don't know Michael Giacchino, you certainly know his music, or you should. If you've seen Lost or the television show Alias or whatever project J.J. Abrams is involved in, you've heard his work. I see Michael Giacchino as like the Neo John, I'm calling him. So John Williams, John Barry, and so forth. Next to Hans Zimmer and members of the Newman family, so the Newman dynasty. So you have like Thomas Newman and his brother, and John Ottoman, Steve Jablonsky. There are several film composers out there, and of course, look, we can't. Ludwig Göransson is ridiculous too. Like, he's definitely super spicy, coming off of Sinners. And everything else you might know him from, The Mandalorian, a bunch of other projects. You know what time it is. But Michael Giacchino is interesting when it comes to the Neo John, as I'd like to sort of call him, at least for the purposes of this discussion here. Michael Giacchino is the successor to John Williams, coming into these franchises that have scores birthed by the legend. So you look at Jurassic Park, and you look at Star Wars is another one. And then next to that, you've got things like Mission Impossible. You got also The Incredibles, and The Incredibles is particularly noteworthy for this example of the John Barry situations. If you don't know the story, it all ties together. I promise. The Incredibles, Michael Giacchino, and the John Barry Jews. So the story behind the score of The Incredibles, if I remember correctly, Brad Bird, who directed The Incredibles, directed Ratatouille, a couple of my really favorite, lovely Pixar films that I love from him. He was trying to get the great John Barry to score The Incredibles picture. Connected with John Barry, and John Barry, once he heard the sort of the pitch and what Brad Bird wanted, which had something to do with something spy related. He wanted to have like a 60s spy feel. Barry declined, and Michael Giacchino stepped in to take over. And that was probably the best thing for The Incredibles, because Giacchino was forced to make something that sounded like a 60s spy film. And it was jazzy, it was brassy, he had all the, but it was very much his own thing. Barry didn't believe he could do anything new in that space, so he passed it up. As great as that soundtrack would have been, John Barry's composed a bunch of other things too outside of James Bond, but I think he's probably more well known for his work in Bond, having been responsible for defining the sound of James Bond. And Brad Bird wanted something in that flavor. Given that you didn't get John Barry, I think Michael Giacchino did a fantastic job. And I want to talk more about that as it pertains to this movie. So let's get into the Fantastic Four first steps. Let's talk about it. I think The Incredibles and this Fantastic Four film in particular owe each other something. The one thing they have in common, well, they have a few things in common, but the key thing they have in common is Michael Giacchino. He scored both of these pictures. And how funny to me when I watched it, but what was funny to me was that, funny in the sense that, wow, that's so interesting how those two films are talking to each other. Michael Giacchino scored The Incredibles in the vein of John Barry, much like he's done with the Star Wars films and with Jurassic Park, how his work is, he knows how to play in the sandbox of other great composers while making it his own. I think he's did the same thing with The Incredibles. Even though John Barry didn't score it, you could hear John Barry's influence in that score. And in this picture, how even though the music necessarily isn't necessarily 60s spy themed, the spirit of this film is obviously, if you look at the look of it, the production design, everything feels very 1960s retro futuristic inspired. If The Incredibles popped up in this movie, they wouldn't seem out of place. And it's so interesting. I just feel like Michael Giacchino, in a way, scored the Fantastic Four in another universe. It's so weird. He scored The Incredibles again, but it's just the Fantastic Four, and it's completely different. I think that's really cool. The other thing that's interesting about this movie, and particularly the characters of Fantastic Four, is that The Incredibles are essentially that, because they are also a family. And which is what I always thought that was kind of cool, that you could have characters that were Fantastic Four but weren't, and it was still engaging and still beautiful, and still made you feel like these characters were a family. And so I like that in some way. And there's four of them. Look, you have Mr. Incredible, Mr. Fantastic, both of them. Like, come on, it doesn't get any more obvious a nod than that. So bless Brad Bird for The Incredibles, which I will talk about on this channel at some point. I just love that the films feel like they're having a conversation to me. So it was the Fantastic Four weekend. I had seen this film. I rewatched the Tim Story duology. I call it the Tim Story Fantastic Four duology of the Fantastic Four and Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. And I even found the unreleased 1994 version that I started watching, which I actually, look, that I know that's been ridiculed and people hate that movie, whatever it is, for whatever reason. It should have at least been released on home video. What I saw, I haven't finished it. I'm planning on finishing it. But what I saw was not crazy. For 1994, that was still pretty tight. Particularly the music, the score in that movie is fantastic. But I'm going off topic. I want to talk about First Steps. The point I'm making is that I had a Fantastic Four weekend. I watched a bunch of Fantastic Four stuff and rewatched stuff. I even went back to the cartoon I used to watch. The old cartoon used to be on UPN or KBHK, Channel 44. If you remember, they had a cartoon show that also came on with The Incredible Hulk, also and Iron Man. Those cartoons all showed up on Saturday morning on UPN, that network. Yeah, man, it's been a blast going back into the to the Fantastic Four juice. It's like, because I used to watch these stuff when I was a kid. So what do I have to say about the First Steps? First of all, if you know the reasoning behind the First Steps as a subtitle, let me know. I haven't found out in my thinking about the movie. I haven't found out where that is relevant. At least Homecoming was thematically relevant, but also it was relevant to like fans, that the idea that Spider-Man is coming home to Marvel. That's where he's coming back to his home. In the movie, there's a homecoming dance, whatever it is. The First Steps here, I'm not sure how that fits into the movie, but again, if you know, let me know. So I would have preferred this movie just call it the Fantastic Four. That's or Enter the Fantastic Four. I don't know, something like that. First Steps feels interesting. I'm not quite sure if I'm still thinking about it. So I'll mull it over some more and maybe I'll figure out why that's there. Is this movie good? I'm sure, but at this point you've heard positive reviews, positive thoughts on this movie, and they are warranted. Personally, as an old fan, I think this movie did the spirit of the characters justice. And coming on the heels of Superman, oddly, it's a weird time, but I think both movies there's room for both movies. And the spirit of that both movies capture feels refreshing right now. Similar to Superman, I think this movie feels like it's hopeful and it's positive. And it's hopeful for the future of the MCU, but also as a one-off, like in the moment viewing, you leave feeling positive. I like that about the movie. It's bright, it's colorful, it feels like the comic books, particularly of the 1960s. Obviously, and I have some of those issues. So how I remembered what the panels looked like and just how the colors looked, and it works. There's a lot of positives about this movie. There's a lot to say, lots of love about this film. The production design is great. Again, the retro-futuristic look is great. I liked how the cars looked correct. The costumes of everybody was looking pretty cool. And just like the sets were really nice. I was a fan of that. The spaceship was cool. Like the Fantastic Car. They don't call it that in the movie, but it's the Fantastic Car. That stuff was looking tight. And it's cool. I like this version of it. If you remember the cartoon or other iterations of it, it's like a plane, like a jet thing that they fly around. And it is that too, but it's a car that converts to a plane. It's actually, it's pretty cool. So yeah, and it's period specific too. It almost looks like this really sleek Cadillac, which is, it's pretty tight. So yeah, man, production design solid. The music obviously is solid. Michael Giacchino is a G, so music is great. The acting. Let's talk about the acting. Across the board, the performances are very strong. Particularly high praise for Vanessa Kirby and Pedro Pascal, for sure. Now, look, there seems to be this weird energy working its way across the various channels right now about Pedro Pascal. Whatever side of the camp you fall on any of that, I don't know too much about it. I'm hearing bits of it, but it seems to be some weird negative energy around him online. Whatever you think, he is fantastic in this movie, no pun intended. And as questionable as I found his casting at first, when I heard when the news was first released about the cast, it had nothing to do with the fact that he's not white. It's the fact that, like, Pedro Pascal, he's everywhere. Like, he's such a and I know a lot of people probably thought John Krasinski should have played Reed Richards after his turn in Multiverse of Madness, which he wasn't bad in. It would have been cool, just to see that. But having seen Pascal here, he's good, as he always is, which is it's not a surprise, really. If you going in, he's a good actor. He's going to bring it, and he does so here. His performance has moments of tremendous understatement, and there's definitely, you feel like there's a ceiling that he's particularly for this role. You've seen him in stuff, he has range. He has tremendous range. And that shows up here. He's playing a character, but he's here that is a little bit more contained, which is cool. It's cool to see this other version of what he's bringing to Reed Richards, and how that actually speaks to a version of the character that I remember from from different medium. So he was very good. Vanessa Kirby, she plays this. Oh man, again, she was questionable to me too. I wasn't sure how Vanessa Kirby was going to fit into sort of this essence of what I, as a fan, hope Susan Richards should be. And I think she plays such a good Sue. This version is really good. She's strong. She's charismatic. She's a bit of a diplomat, that's pretty cool to see. You don't often see that in a lot of Fantastic Four media, but there's examples of it in the comics, sure, but she's fierce, and she plays it very well. She actually gets to expand a bit in this role, and to the point to where we get to see her emote like majorly, and that's kind of cool. Joseph Quinn and Ebon-Moss Bacharach as Johnny Storm and Benjamin Grimm, respectively, rounding out the four, is good. They all have good chemistry, and those two particularly have good chemistry. I liked how Johnny Storm was probably the most grounded that I'd seen him in across different media, and he was still fun too. He still had some fun, and I liked that he was smart. Like, they showed his intelligence too. You don't see that often in a lot of Fantastic Four stuff. I certainly don't remember too much of it. So it was nice to get a taste of it here. And Ebon-Moss, I think he's pretty good as Benjamin Grimm. Ebon-Moss is pretty good as Benjamin Grimm. I liked him, and I liked that he sounded like normal still. Like, to say, look, no disrespect to Michael Chiklis or any other iteration of the Thing. I love Michael Chiklis, by the way. I think he's a great Benjamin Grimm. I'm going to talk about those movies too. I think he's fantastic. He was excellent. Ebon-Moss, though, the difference is like how much more down to earth and how much more everyman Ben feels in this version. And I like that. Oddly, I wasn't sure about his beard, his facial hair, but I kind of like that they gave that was a detail there, and then they have, he gets to play with that a little bit. That was pretty cool, because you figure, yeah, he's like all rock and junk, but there's something still organic about some of that stuff. So why wouldn't he grow whatever version of that facial hair, whatever that looks like, because he would have been, if he was still not a rock, he would be growing stuff still. So it feels like that's kind of weird. Why wouldn't he? It oddly makes sense. Anyway, Ebon-Moss was great. The quartet, the team, the core team is great. They have great chemistry with each other. And then when you split them between Sue and Reed, Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby have great chemistry, but also Joseph Quinn and Ebon-Moss, they have great chemistry too. Obviously, can't get away with this without talking about Julia Garner and Ralph Ineson. The two of them are our antagonists, or our sort of opposition for our heroes. Julia Garner plays the Silver Surfer, or Shalabal, in this movie, and I love that Silver Surfer is never used in the movie. It feels much more real. But Shalabal, I like that there's an in-universe in the comics world. They didn't just like make the Silver Surfer female. There is precedent for this, and I love that they grabbed onto that and built on it for this movie. And Julia Garner is great. I think she does a really good job in this movie. Visually, she looks fantastic too. Like, she looks great. Ralph Ineson also is a commanding and scary Galactus. To say nothing of how the design is realized, which is excellent. The voice matches, and I like that he felt threatening throughout. It reminded me of Avengers Age of Ultron. It's the opposite of that. How James Spader is he has a tremendous voice, and he was unsettling and super scary as Ultron. The problem with Ultron in the movie Age of Ultron was that he ended up coming off at certain points as more erratic. He was threatening initially, and then as the movie continues, he sort of loses some of his weight, and which is not what you feel like when you watch the trailer. You're worried. You're thinking about the Avengers, going, man, that's going to be a tough villain for them. But the movie doesn't really deliver on that. With this movie, though, Ralph Ineson's voice is perfect for the cinematic version of Galactus. And it's like, this is the proper version of Galactus. If you know him from the comic books or any video games or any other media you may have experienced him from, outside of Rise of Silver Surfer, they found ways to sort of spiritually kind of get him in a little bit, but this is by far and away the version, the cinematic version of Galactus to pay attention to, because spiritually true to the source material, and it adds its own thing to make it work for this movie, and that's great. Visuals now. The visuals are expectedly excellent. Particularly, there was a chase scene in space that is one of the more riveting and thrilling chase scenes I've seen in a while. Particularly when you compare it to the Fantastic Four movies, the history of Fantastic Four movies, but just in general, it looks very good, very strong, and very well executed. Visuals are excellent. The visuals of Galactus. Galactus is really terrifying, particularly when you first meet him, and that's exactly how I wanted my Galactus to be. That's how I know him to be, and so I'm glad that this movie didn't cut corners. They gave us a proper introduction to Galactus in the MCU. And I love that. And he looked the part. And they added little details to his look, little lights and things. Like, it's almost like Galactus is kind of like a ship, but he's this cosmic being that has like craters and lights and different and like crevices that look like machinery and stuff. It's very well realized. Some of my cons, my issues with the movie have to do with Shia LaBeouf not being more expanded on, and I wanted more of I wanted more moments between Shia LaBeouf and Johnny Storm. I think what they give us works, but I think there's probably one or two more scenes that could have been added to enrich that dynamic. Similarly, Benjamin Grimm connects with a teacher played by Natasha Lyonne in this movie, and that relationship was not given enough time. I think between Johnny and Shia LaBeouf and Benjamin and Rachel, I think the teacher's name is, there's only like a couple scenes. But I think for each of those dynamics, I think one or two more would have given us some would have added a little bit more to the proceedings. They're like little threads that are kind of shoddily tied up, and I think we needed a little bit more to make it feel like something. You know, it's hard when you think about how much room needs to be given to the core team for us to believe that they're a family, which I think is done well. But you don't give us enough of the outside stuff, which I think that could have made the film a little bit more rich, which is funny because there's something I thought about with, particularly when you consider the majority of Fantastic Four films and how none of them break 2 hours, which is a little bit of a shame because if you added maybe 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, you could have squeezed in another scene with Johnny Storm and Shia LaBeouf and Benjamin Grimm and his person to give us, you know, to make it a little bit more enriching. Again, it doesn't kill the movie. It's just something that might have been nice. I would have liked a little bit more with that. And I think thirdly, the other dynamic that I think I wanted more of is more Johnny Storm and Benjamin Grimm. I wanted more banter, more teasing between the two of them. They don't get enough of that here. I want a little bit more of that. From what I know from the comics and stuff like that, maybe one or two more scenes of that. Like, and you know what? Look, Johnny and Sue get really one moment, one good moment. I wanted one or two more of the moments with them. They're siblings. We need more. They need more time together. Yeah, I think those are my my biggest issues with the movie. I had one other minor issue, and it didn't bother me during my viewing, but when I finished the movie and I thought more about it, and I don't know that I bought fully Sue Storm's power on display as it pertains to the last act. You can make a case, Mama Bear energy and all of that. And I love that they showed it. I love, because Sue's actually quite powerful. I love that they gave us an example of that. However, I just, something about it made me question whether or not that would work against a cosmic being in the same way without assistance. But then I thought about it. So that was an issue for me at first. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, look, the team, their powers come from cosmic rays. So why couldn't her power at least do some damage to a cosmic being like Galactus? So that works. The idea that works. It just something about the execution of it, how it was displayed, felt a little bit off to me. Doesn't mean I didn't love it, but that's basically it. Everything else is pretty good about the movie. This is a solid. I loved also that it's kind of a standalone. It's not really a part of the main MCU timeline, and that's kind of neat. It's almost like this. You could look at what's happening now in the MCU, particularly with the start of Thunderbolts, as this fresh restart. Thunderbolts, I think you could sort of quietly count it as a restart because of its footing is sort of sound. It was very well executed. If you've seen my review on Thunderbolts, you know what I think about it. I think it's a solid sort of restart for the MCU. But when you get here, this is a more direct shakeup because it's not directly a part of the main timeline. It's its own thing as a standalone situation. And of course, when you think about the mid-credit sequence and end title sequence, those sequences feel self-contained, and I like that those sequences don't reach beyond the context and the confines of this movie. They don't get us excited for other stories way down the line. As far as we know, this could be this, whatever we get in the post-credit sequence is Fantastic Four 2 or whatever it is. And I love that. It's kind of cool. So listen, I can keep gushing about this movie. I think you can tell I enjoyed it. And I do intend to talk about the other Fantastic Four films. I'm on the fence about Fanforstic 4, as everyone keeps calling it Fanforstic. Haven't watched that one yet, but I might do that. But I do want to finish the 1994 unreleased version first before I do that. And I'll, hopefully at some point down the line, give my thoughts on it. But the Fantastic Four First Steps is very watchable. It's very enjoyable. It's fun. It has a certain degree of weight to it, which I also loved. I loved the weight of it, the massiveness of the cosmic angle to it. And it felt very serious. But it wasn't serious at the expense of the story. And I liked that. Also, the humor in this movie is mostly solid. There are one or two instances where the humor felt included just for fans. I'm not quite sure how well some of the moments worked in the context of the story, because maybe this was an action scene that was happening and something else was jumping up at the same time where it didn't feel like it worked for me. But personally, I think it's clobbering time, for instance, which is, if you know anything about Fantastic Four, that is a staple line of the Thing. I think having a reference to it as a joke is great. Having it thrown in a moment where it didn't feel like even the character was with that feels problematic for me. Because to me, that's like, if you remember Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig version, he's ordering a drink and he's asked if he wants it shaken, not stirred. Bond never actually orders his drink in that movie like that. Like, we know what it is, but I think it's cool that the reference is there. That's enough. So to have Benjamin Grimm be faced with like a toy or himself on in a cartoon, and having him say it's clobbering time on the cartoon, but then the real Benjamin Grimm is not really with that. That's enough. That, to me, as a fan, it's enough that it's in there. I don't need my live action Benjamin Grimm to jump on that. If he's not with it, I feel like the reference of it is enough. I don't need, well, that's just my personal opinion. That aside, the movie was tight. So if you haven't seen it yet, check it out because it is pretty good. It's a nice, you can make a nice double feature with Superman and this movie. And I think both movies you would leave mostly feeling good. People had a lot to say about Superman, and there are a lot of people who are probably disappointed with it. But if you're not one of those people, you might like both. You might feel good coming out of both of these movies. I did. So, but you be the judge. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you again for your time. Thank you for watching and talking Fantastic Four with me. Stay tuned. More reviews are getting ready and they'll be on the way pretty soon. In the meantime, I'm getting out of here. Take care of yourself and I'll see you in the next one.